And joining us right now, Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Happy 4th.
Happy almost 4th, yeah. Let's talk about the president and his Supreme Court pick. We're looking at a name coming out July 9th. Are we going to be hearing about anyone? Can we expect anyone who may be considered contentious, or are we going to look at pretty, more mainstream, non-contentious names to come out from the president?
Well, I think we're going to get an equivalent to Neil Gorsuch. We're going to get, let's just, cut to the chase here. The Democrats are against anybody that the president will choose, no matter how qualified, how neutral and detached, how thoughtful, how brilliant. The Democrats are going to be against him because they think that he or she that the president nominates should not be confirmed on this idiotic notion that you can't confirm somebody in a congressional election year, even though there are at least 9 justices who have been confirmed during off-year election years. So, their arguments have now reached the point of beyond silliness. So I would say that Brett Kavanaugh seems to have picked up a lot of steam from the D.C. Circuit. Wonderful judge, very smart, understands administrative law, which, of course, is the core function of that court to review administrative agency decisions. Amy Coney Barrett from Indiana, is a fascinating jurist. Also, Joan Larson, from Michigan. There are some phenomenal candidates. The president, as you know, put out all these names before the election. He said, these are the people I'm going to consider. So if you're voting for me, you're basically voting for at least 1 or 2, maybe 3 people to go on the Supreme Court. The president's in a very strong political position, in a very strong substantive position with the quality of the nominees. They've all been vetted extensively. I think what we're going to get from the Democrats is more smoke and mirrors, extreme nastiness, screaming and yelling, perhaps even physical activities on the floor of the Senate. I wouldn't put it past them because the party has become the party of nutso, lefto crazies, and God only knows how they're going to corrupt and embarrass the American people and the United States Senate during this process.
Well, they have little recourse to stop this beyond a tantrum, so you're right, that could actually happen. Let me get, because you seem to be close to this, and I want to ask you kind of a two-parter on this senator in particular. Susan Collins of Maine, she's nominally a Republican, but poses a risk here for the president. She is opposing potentially anybody who would threaten to overturn Roe versus Wade. Of course, that's not actually ever a crystal clear thing when you handle a Supreme Court nominee, because you never get into specifics on a case like that. But first on that specifically, this idea that the Supreme Court, once it rules on something, it's precedent and therefore never be overturned ever. Is that a sensible way to approach what would make a good Supreme Court justice?
Well, of course not, because as you know, the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott case that slaves were not full human beings under the Constitution. That was, of course, reversed. Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal, reversed. And just the other day, the Supreme Court reversed a 40-year-old labor law decision and held that a person who is a member of who is a public employee cannot be forced to join a public union and be forced to pay dues. They reversed a 40-year-old, that's only from the 1970s, decision of the Supreme Court. So the notion that you can't reverse decisions is, of course, ludicrous. However, Roe v. Wade is some sort of a super issue. And it's pretty clear that Susan Collins and others would consider that to be a basis for a no vote. Now, no nominee for Supreme Court justice is ever going to answer that question. How would you vote to overturn Roe v. Wade? The case may come before me. I can't talk about it. And those are part of the judicial ethics that abound during a Senate confirmation hearing.
Right.
So the only thing they're going to be able to do is look at the record of these people and see if they've ever written about the subject. And for the most part, I think there's only 1 or 2 judges that have ever said anything about Roe v. Wade, and the rest of them have quite properly remained moot on the subject.
Right.
Mute on the subject. So it's going to be, you know what it is, it's going to be the floor show. They're going to be screaming and yelling, and why won't you answer this question? This is so important. This is different, they're going to say. You have to answer this one.
Right. And Mike, Mike Lee, I think, did compare it to Dred Scott. Like, he may have been one of the guys who've talked about this. I want to also expand on something else Susan Collins said. And you're so close to this, you often have insight into it and intel that we don't. The White House supposedly has a narrow list of just 25 candidates. Susan Collins said this weekend that she was told by the White House counsel that list has been expanded, that there are more people that we don't know about on that list. Is that true based on what you know?
Well, we do know that the president himself added a few names some time ago from the original list.
Right.
So that may be what she's talking about. If she's talking about new people, in addition to the list that existed at the time that Gorsuch was selected, that's news to me.
Okay. Okay.
Joe, do you see all the Republicans voting for this and getting through whomever President Trump picks, or are there a couple of Republicans who you think might be wild cards?
Well, presumably John McCain is going to stay in Arizona, so he won't be available. He's there at the end of life, fighting brain cancer. God bless him, and we wish him all the best during this terrible time. So. You never know what Susan Collins is going to do, or Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. They're very strong on pro-choice. We're going to pick up at least probably two Democrats, Joe Manchin and, a couple other people. Our possibilities, probably Donnelly from Indiana. Mm-hmm. So there's probably going to be enough votes, even if you get a Republican defection, although that would be too close. And I think that, I can't imagine, it's difficult for me to conceive of anybody, even Jeff Flake, who's a total screwball,
right,
denying the president something so important, because if they were the deciding vote, like McCain was the deciding vote against the repeal of Obamacare, for the rest of your life, you are persona non grata anywhere in the world among Republicans. I just don't see anybody biting that bullet.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, it's and in Jeff Flake's case, I think he actually backed away from his judicial opposition really quickly.
That usually changed his mind. He really is a flake, and good riddance.
There you go. Joe DiGenova, thank you as always, bringing some clarity to this on this a very interesting week ahead of that announcement on July 9th. Happy Independence Week. Take care, sir.